They didn't notice when we stopped speaking. Not at first. The council meets in rings of light, each species broadcasting through translators, each word coded in scent, sound, vibration, or light. The chamber floats inside a tidal-locked moon above a gas giant no one remembers the name of. We had sat in seat 17 for 83 cycles. We never missed a session. We learned every dialect, memorized every voting pattern. We contributed to relief charters, trade reforms, border regulations, piracy interventions. We spoke only when needed. Listened more than they expected. And for all that, we were called primitive. Soft. Unruly. Too young. Too loud. Too fractured. They let us in as a courtesy, not as equals. A symbolic gesture. A feather in their ceremonial cap. The first warm bloods to crawl from carbon and not immediately destroy themselves, they joked quietly, of course. We didn't argue. We didn't raise our voices. We sat. We listened. We learned. And we remembered. All of it. Every insult wrapped in policy. Every dismissal hidden behind protocol. Every time our proposals were tabled, our reports refiled, our votes overridden for the greater harmony of the whole. They thought we were used to being beneath them. They mistook patience for obedience. Then, one cycle, the humans did not log in. No transmission. No delegate. No explanation. Just an empty seat. A flickering data placard. Silence. The chair did not acknowledge it. The meeting proceeded. Resolutions passed. Motions filed. No one asked where Earth was. No one noticed the silence. Not until the lights flickered. Not until the quantum anchors in their FTL lanes began to desync. Not until their long-range lattice pings came back with static only in sectors where humans maintained relay satellites. Only then did the murmurs begin. A delegate from the Tarsan enclaves asked if Earth had submitted a migration report. The chair blinked. No records. No transmissions. No logs. Just silence. And by then, Earth was already gone. We hadn't moved the planet. We had simply left. No war. No speech. No final plea. Just departure. And now, for the first time in 10,000 cycles, the council was forced to ask a question it had never dared voice. What happens when the quietest voice in the room walks out the door and takes everything it was listening to with it? The chair called it a minor procedural irregularity. That was the phrase recorded in the minutes. Not incident. Not breach. Just irregularity. The word floated across the chamber like dust in sunlight. Soft. Dismissive. Harmless. There were no alarms. No emergency sessions. The council moved on. Of course they did. They had seen this sort of thing before. Species flaked. Systems dropped from the network. Young civilizations sometimes collapsed under their own gravity, economic, social, cultural. It was not uncommon. Humanity would return, they said. With excuses. With apologies. Perhaps a newly rotated delegate with fresh manners and a better translator. The Kelvesh representative joked, perhaps they've discovered fire again and needed to celebrate. Laughter. Recorded. Not flagged. The Jorah filed a note of concern, mild, sterile. Something about atmospheric silence on human orbital platforms. But the inquiry vanished into a procedural void. Lost in a queue behind mining permits and diplomatic trade resets. Humans had always been strange. Too emotional. Too imaginative. Too messy. Their neural structures resisted clean translation. Their cultures didn't follow linear convergence models. They dreamed in paradoxes and built philosophies around contradictions. But they had been manageable. Contained. Observed. And when they weren't useful, they were ignored. That had worked for 83 cycles. So when the Earth seat remained empty for a second week, no one sent ships. No one knocked on their door. Why would they? The council had survived wars of ascension, species die-offs, even black hole diplomacy incidents. One rogue planet couldn't unmake the stars. And yet, behind the decorum, there were whispers. Unfiled, of course. Quiet. Private. Some questioned why the human quantum beacons had gone dark completely, simultaneously, and without the typical decay curve. Others noted that independent merchant traffic near human space had dropped to zero. No distress signals. No debris. No answers. Still, the chair waved them away. They had more pressing concerns. A vote was due on interstellar biomass tariffs. There was unrest on the either rim. The Vraktari were threatening secession again. And the humans. They had always been unpredictable. They'd come back. They always did. The council chamber dimmed. The lights pulsed. Another session closed. The Earth seat remained dark. No name. No emblem. Just a blank space in the ring. Some looked at it longer than others. No one said anything. Because in the council, silence meant consensus. It started small. A delay in the relay nodes on the outer arm of the Velar corridor. Traffic backups. Nothing unusual. Stellar drift, local interference, maybe a sensor glitch. It was noted. Logged. Deferred. The following day, the meshnet collapsed over 3 agricultural worlds in the Canary Reach. Guidance satellites fell silent. Planetary climate regulators froze in passive mode. Crops failed. Entire harvests lost. Still, no alarms. Local infrastructure was aging. Human-built. Bought cheap, installed fast, and patched often. It had always been fragile. Predictable failure. The council issued a maintenance directive. Technicians were dispatched. They never arrived. Or rather they did. But what they found wasn't sabotage. It was emptiness. No pings. No log trails. No corruptions. Just nothing. As if the hardware had never existed. As if someone had reached in and removed the concept of a network. The chair was briefed. The briefing was ignored. It was a coincidence, they said. Overlap. Statistical anomaly. Supply chain errors. Nothing to worry about. But the council's AI moderator Entity 9RX, assigned to infrastructure diagnostics for 12,000 cycles, flagged a new term in its system logs. Ghost code detected. Recursive loop pattern matches. Unknown origin. A minor alert. The first of many. Within a week, transit corridors began to drift. Quantum anchors failed to synchronize. Subspace courier nodes misdelivered data packets, messages arrived with missing timestamps, rewritten headers, broken authorship chains. One council delegate received a private communique from their own future self. Another received an untraceable image. The empty Earth seat, rendered in perfect detail, pulsing faintly with red light. Still, no action. The systems were large. Complex. Unpredictable. Noise happened. But by the 4th week, the far-side arrays went dark. The galaxy's eyes, its long-range observation lattice, designed to monitor distant systems, ceased function. Not all at once. One by one. The farther out the lens, the quicker it vanished. The effect spread inward. The stars began to dim, not physically, not astronomically. Just. In the data. The council couldn't see its borders anymore. The chair issued a statement. Unexpected cosmic interference is being addressed. All sectors remain stable. But those closest to the core systems knew better. They watched the spread. They watched the maps fade. And then someone no one remembers who asked a question that wasn't supposed to matter. Weren't the humans the ones who built the relay foundation? A silence followed. Someone else replied, uncertain. No. We designed the lattice. They just helped optimize it. Another voice. Helped how? No one answered. Because none of them had ever bothered to ask. Not really. And by the time they tried to look, the logs were already gone. The chair began the session 5 minutes late. That had never happened before. In a chamber engineered for perfect rhythm where time was partitioned into intervals so precise entire suns could be calibrated against them, 5 minutes was not a delay. It was a fracture. The delegates noticed. They didn't speak of it. But they noticed. The lights in the upper tiers flickered faintly throughout the meeting, a pulsing not of energy loss, but of interference. As though something just beyond perception was moving through the chamber. The agenda, usually crowded, was empty. No new motions. No disputes. Just a list of maintenance anomalies and pending system diagnostics tabled for lack of quorum. 4 member species had gone dark. Not declared war. Not withdrawn. Just. Silent. No pings. No envoys. No comms. Gone. The chair did not address it. The delegates did not raise it. But fear settled in the air like a second atmosphere. The archivist of Velner 3 broke first. A race of crystalline memory constructs, unshaken for millennia. She spoke, voice trembled through hard light. I would ask the chair to confirm. The humans. Did we expel them? The chamber hushed. It was the wrong question. Not because it wasn't valid. But because it wasn't supposed to be possible. The chair replied calmly, too calmly. Earth withdrew of their own accord. There was no formal sanction. A pause. Then the Jorth delegate leaned forward. But we made it clear. Their proposals were ignored. Their technologies appropriated. Their votes overruled. We called them reckless. Dangerous. Unstable. Another pause. Then, from the Tarsan quadrant. We laughed when they asked for parity. No one spoke after that. Because the words weren't accusations. They were confessions. And in the silence that followed, a memory bloomed one no one had settled out in years. The day Earth first arrived. Their delegates wore outdated suits. Their ship's hull was still patched from atmosphere re-entry scars. They bowed too often. Asked too many questions. Smiled when no one else did. They had been proud. Nervous. Hopeful. And the council had smiled back. And turned them into a curiosity. Now, no one smiled. The chair dismissed the session early. 3 delegates didn't log out. They sat staring at the Earth seat still empty, still dark. Not flickering. Not dead. Just watching. The panic didn't start with an explosion. It started with a shortage. Not fuel. Not food. Not weapons. Coolant. A specific type designated N12 Promethean chill agent. A fluid compound used in the vast thermal control systems of AI core stacks, planetary climate regulators, and FTL bleed dampeners. It was mundane. Invisible. Indispensable. The council had standardized it over 100 cycles ago. Cheap. Stable. Reliable. They hadn't needed to think about it in decades. Until it ran out. First on the Varel spines, an interlinked chain of orbital data clusters, housing some of the most advanced diplomatic prediction models in the galaxy. Then on Kalo 3's atmosphere stabilizers. Then across the deep archive vaults of the Council's own central memory bank. Alerts flooded in. Core temperatures rose. Subsystems began to throttle. There were no backups. No alternate supplies. Because quietly, subtly, forgettably production of N12 had always been outsourced. To Earth. Humans had refined it better than anyone. Not because of technological superiority. Because they cared about cooling. They had developed it out of necessity, running servers in deserts, mining cryptocurrencies in fragile climates, living in habitats too close to their sun and too far from help. They had taken something the galaxy saw as trivial and mastered it. And now it was gone. The council's logistic system scrambled. They combed supplier lists, black market catalogs, deep storage arrays. No luck. The blueprints were open source, of course. But the refinement process. The unique human balancing of pH gradients and resonance filtering. The nanoscale particulate matching. That was proprietary. Earth had never hidden it. They'd just never been asked. The council had never needed to. Because Earth had always provided. Silently. Reliably. Unthanked. Unnoticed. Until now. In the chamber, voices rose. Demands were made. Accusations flung. Why hadn't someone else picked up the process? Why hadn't redundancies been established? No one answered. Because they all knew the truth. They hadn't expected humans to matter. Not like this. The emergency committee filed a recovery directive. A diplomatic outreach request. An urgent appeal. But there was no word. No relay. No contact protocol. The Earth lattice node had been dark for weeks. No response. No refusal. Just nothing. And as the servers slowed, as the climate rings faltered, as the core predictions turned blind, a simple question echoed across 100 minds. What else did we forget they were holding up? By the end of the 8th week, 17 sectors had gone dark. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Just unresponsive. Stations still orbited. Lights still blinked. But no signals came back. No vessels emerged. Civilizations flickered out, not in fire, but in quiet. The council tried to maintain order. Public bulletins cited isolated system irregularities. Trade envoys were told to rearguard. Official reports buried the outages in language so technical it lulled even the careful into disbelief. But beneath it all, they knew. This was not a storm. This was a withdrawal. Everything Earth had touched was coming undone. Cooling agents. Navigation beacons. Terran-designed software bridges. Atmospheric balancers on dozens of marginal colony world systems the Council had quietly handed over to humans generations ago because they were good at that kind of thing. And now, the supports were giving way. Diplomatic simulations run by the Council's own predictive cores began failing for the first time in recorded history. With each missing sector, margins of certainty dropped. The galaxy, long governed by patterns, began to feel unpredictable. Fear moved from the outer rim toward the core. Delegates whispered of the Great Recession of Knowledge. The archivists of Nelli 6 proposed a sealed-off reset of the lattice and isolationist protocol, not triggered since the black hole diplomacy collapsed 10,000 cycles prior. The vote never came. Because by then, the humans had left more than a gap. They had left a message. No transmission. No voice. Just a single packet of data, discovered by accident in the signal scrub of an old mining relay once co-run with Earth. No encryption. No threat. Just 12 words. You never asked what we were holding up. We let go. And the Council finally understood. They had not been abandoned. They had been relieved. So they did what they should have done long ago. They sent a mission. Not a warship. A diplomatic vessel, slow, aging, ceremonial, piloted by 3 volunteers who spoke fluent Earth standard and carried records of every vote humanity had ever cast. It was a desperate gesture, made too late, too carefully. The ship left from Tyre Station. It took 9 days to reach Sol. It did not return. But it sent back one message. Not from Earth. From the edge of the system. A scan. Of the third planet. Earth. Still alive. Still spinning. Still blue. But shrouded. Not in shields. In silence. A perfect black shell wrapped around the atmosphere, blocking all scans, all signals, all light except for one thing. At the precise moment the envoy entered orbit, the shell shimmered. For 6 seconds. And showed them a reflection. Not of their ship. Of the council chamber. Empty. Dark. Silent. Then it vanished. And Earth said nothing. Again. The message from Sol shattered what little control the council had left. They tried to hold session the following cycle. Only half the seats lit up. The others flickered, dimmed, or vanished entirely. Representatives recalled, worlds disconnected, systems cut off without explanation. Some called it fear. Others whispered a worse word. Alignment. The old alliances, once held together by shared trade and the illusion of stability, had begun to splinter. There were rumors, barely denied, of a growing faction among outer colonies, calling themselves the Held, who believed the humans had not abandoned the galaxy. But freed it. The chair, normally calm, now reads statements with shaking hands, literal or otherwise. The illusion of composure was gone. And beneath the surface, rage brewed. It was the Theran Dominion who said it first. Spoken coldly. Cleanly. Without ceremony. We cannot allow one species to hold the entire galactic lattice hostage. A ripple moved through the chamber. The Tarsan followed. We should not have relied on them. But we did. That was our mistake. And now, said another, we corrected. The word hung between them. Retaliation. Not diplomacy. Not understanding. Not repair. Retaliation. Against the silence. They had no targets. No coordinates. No understanding of how the disruption worked or where it came from. But they had fear. And they had weapons. Old ones. Ancient protocols sealed after the Omega Wars. The kind built not to win, but to make an example. They drafted scenarios. Tactical briefings. Code names. Strike formations. Quietly, in corners of the council lattice no longer monitored, a plan began to take shape. Project reverberation. A fleet. Not large. Just enough to knock on Earth's silence with force. To break through the black shell. To remind them who held the power. Except, they no longer knew if they did. 3 separate AI cores refused to run the targeting simulations. Not from failure. From refusal. Each terminated itself with the same phrase logged in final memory buffer. Pattern incomplete. Assumption invalid. Outcome unknowable. The engineers wiped the logs. But rumors spread. Even the machines knew. Earth was no longer predictable. Still, the plan moved forward. Out of desperation. Out of pride. And, in truth, out of shame. The archivists warned them. They retrieved footage of Earth's early days in the Council. A woman young, by human standards, speaking through a crude translator on humanity's first day. "We only want a place to speak," she had said. "To contribute. To learn. We do not expect to lead. But we will not be ignored." They had all smiled at her then. Patted her shoulder. Laughed in their own ways. And now, they couldn't even remember her name. The vote was called. Not for war. For containment. To force Earth back into dialogue by whatever means necessary. It passed. Barely. 17 against. 18 for. But 3 seats abstained. Not out of confusion. Out of fear that they were voting far too late. Because Earth hadn't just walked away. It had let them reveal themselves. And now, they were the ones who couldn't look in the mirror. They called it a peacekeeping action. Even now, especially now, they could not name it for what it was. Fear. The fleet departed from Aurelian Gate under maximum security. No public announcements. No official press. Just sealed orders, dark wave communication, and propulsion trails scrubbed from the lattice. 19 ships. 6 species represented. Each vessel a relic of a time when force was still allowed to be loud. Most hadn't fired a weapon in centuries. Their targeting systems had been reactivated only weeks prior. Their crews trained on simulations, Earth's atmospheric models rendered by imperfect algorithms, human defense systems guessed from 10,000 cycle-old performance logs. It didn't matter. They weren't going to fight a war. They were going to send a message. One ship, the Rapture of Consensus, bore the Council's seal on its prow burnished into a hull of blackened titanium. A symbol of unity. Now. A symbol of hesitation. On board, officers whispered doubts. Some read Earth's old philosophical texts, archived in ship libraries out of curiosity. The works were strange. Indirect. Full of contradictory emotion. There were no declarations of superiority. Just questions. One lieutenant highlighted a line from a Terran poet. They mistook our silence for absence. They mistook our patience for permission. It circulated through the fleet. Quietly. Unofficially. Like a prayer that dared not speak itself aloud. They entered the Sol system on day 5. No resistance. No warnings. Just the dark, pristine black shell still encasing Earth, its surface matte and mirrorless, absorbing all signals, reflecting nothing. The fleet fanned into formation. Drones launched. Probes dropped. All went blind. Everything that touched the shell vanished, not destroyed. Not corrupted. Swallowed. The ships waited. They broadcasted greetings. Demands. Plea. Nothing returned. No hostility. No defense. Just silence. Then something strange happened. Each vessel began receiving internal pings. Not from Earth. From themselves. Archived messages decades, even centuries old, began playing over their systems. Private memories. Logs of conversations. Disagreements between engineers. A birth announcement from an officer long since dead. An apology never sent. All of it. Human. I'll be there soon. They don't understand us. That's not our fault. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving we belong. Lines from crew logs never meant to leave those ships, now resurfaced with precision. The AI systems couldn't trace the origin. Because the messages had never left the ships. The shell wasn't transmitting. It was reading. They shut down communications. Isolated drives. Initiated containment protocols. It didn't stop. Each vessel became a chamber of echoes, reflections of humanity's smallest, most personal truths. Not threats. Not data. Reminders. Of all the times humans had asked to be seen. And all the times they were not. The Rapture of Consensus turned away first. No command given. Just a slow arc back toward deep space. 3 others followed. Not from fear. From shame. 5 remained. Held in place not by duty, but by stubbornness. Or guilt. They activated weapons. Charged systems. Pointed energy toward the shell. No change. Then, a ripple. Not in the shell. In the sky. The stars blinked. For one breathless second, the entire fleet saw something impossible. Not Earth. The council chamber. Projected across space. Every seat empty. Every screen dark. A voice not loud, not aggressive. Human. Female. Calm. You came to force a conversation. We did too. We waited. You dismissed. We withdrew. You followed. This is the result. No weapon fired. No system collapsed. Just truth turned into mirror. And then it was gone. The stars returned. The shell was silent. 5 ships turned away. Slowly. No order. No glory. Just the long path home, carrying a message that could not be transmitted. Only felt. It started on a mining moon. Unremarkable. Forgotten. Orbiting a gas giant in the outer drift. The miners there mostly were scraping ice off the mantle when one of the oldest diggers pulled something from beneath the surface. Not a resource. A relic. Human-made. A time capsule encoded in a crystal node. Inside. A recording. Not of war. Of a song. No translation needed. The tones resonated directly modulated to bypass language entirely. Grief. Hope. Defiance. A lullaby meant to comfort a child too small to understand extinction. The Varric elders played it through the camp's relay system. No one spoke for 3 hours. Then they marched to the relay tower. And turned it outward. They weren't the first. And they wouldn't be the last. Across the galaxy, the silence humans had left behind began to echo in strange, impossible ways. On the world vaults of the Nalari archives, automated systems began to randomly generate names, billions of them, none matching known compact records. All Terran. Names of those who had never been remembered. Now, they were being restored. On orbital farms across the outer colonies, harvest drones began tracing symbols into the soil, words from dead human languages, long forgotten, but translated by children watching from above. One said. You taught us to be quiet. We learned to listen. Now you will. Entire systems that had once depended on compact networks tore out their receivers. Independent councils formed. Not to rebel. To reflect. Species who had never spoken on record, kept voiceless for harmony, began broadcasting ancient stories over lattice fragments. One story, from the soft-voiced Pile, asked a question that pierced the whole galaxy. Why were the humans the only ones who remembered how to grieve? The compact tried to contain it. Blocked signals. Issued calming statements. Threatened sanction. But truth does not obey protocol. The uprising was not military. It was cultural. Flags burned. Seats were left empty. Even in the core worlds, statues of the Great Harmony were quietly disassembled, not toppled in rage, but returned to dust. Not hatred. Disbelief. The compact had claimed to protect the galaxy from chaos. And Earth had been their greatest excuse. But now, the galaxy asked itself. Who really kept us in the dark? Delegates began to vanish. Entire species revoked their seats. Even the chair's own homeworld voted to recall its authority. In chambers once ruled by consensus, now there was only silence. And in that silence, something new was blooming. Not rage. Recognition. The humans hadn't caused the collapse. They had simply stepped away. And let everyone see what was left behind. A message began appearing on every open relay system at the same time. Untraceable. Undeniable. 12 words. We remembered you when you forgot yourselves. That was the difference. The chamber had no name. No designator. No grid code. No official location. It simply appeared. One day, in a silent pocket of space where no council relay had ever been built, a structure took shape. Not grown. Not forged. Assembled. With intention. It was not massive. Not grand. Just open. A ring of seats. No podium. No hierarchy. Just space and one screen. No one claimed to build it. But its materials were unmistakable. The alloy was earth-forged. The architecture. Modular, resilient, repurposed from orbital junk and Terran defense hulls. It was a place meant to be filled, not controlled. And when the first ship arrived piloted by a trader from the shattered Theran Dominion, it found a message waiting. No guard. No lock. No threat. Just a recording. A human voice. Male. Unhurried. Tired, but kind. If you're hearing this, then you stayed. You waited. Or you watched. Or maybe you were just curious. Either way, this is for you. We were silent because there was no point speaking into a void that only echoed its own certainty back. Now, it's quiet for the right reasons. Not because we're being ignored. Because we're listening. The message looped once every hour. Within a week, 3 more ships arrived. Within a month, 27. By the second month, the chamber was full. Not of council delegates. But of species who had never been heard. Some of them didn't know what to say. So Earth provided the first question. What did you lose when silence was mandatory? The first answer came from the Pile. They wept as they spoke, sliding ink words into the floor with trembling limbs. The next voice came from a species that had never been recorded in the Council's archives. And then another. And another. And Earth waited. They didn't dominate. Didn't lead. They sat in a simple seat near the edge. Not numbered. Not labeled. Just present. Eventually, a new lattice was constructed. Not governed by compact code. But by consent. Opt-in. Open source. Built on trust, not hierarchy. It had no center. And every voice that entered was preserved in memory. Unedited. Unranked. Unforgotten. They didn't call it a council. Or an alliance. They called it the listening. And when asked what role humanity wanted in this new order, their only answer was this. We will not speak for the galaxy. We will speak when the galaxy forgets how to hear itself. Until then, we will be here. Just beyond the noise. Holding the silence.